Bauxite isn't an engine that grabs attention. It's dirty, its paint's faded, and its wooden buffers are chipped and worn. But this little engine's condition tells part of its story and how it earned its place among the greats and the fastest. Bauxite was named after the very thing it was designed to shift: bauxite. The engine was officially classed as number 305 and was built at the Black Hawthorn and Company Limited in Gateshead. The works where bauxite was built had been around in some form or another since 1835. Called John Culfard and Sons, the works built primarily 240 engines and 060 engines. They also took in, repaired and overhauled existing steam engines. In 1853, following the partnership dissolving, Ralph took over as sole owner, but he was keen to sell the business on as he was looking to retire. He was approached by William Black and Thomas Hawthorn, who purchased the business and became Black Hawthorn and Company. Black Hawthorn and Company had a very specific view of what they wanted to do. They concentrated on making industrial shunters. These engines were basic to say the least. They had no frills and hardly any decorative features. They were designed simply to work. The engines had to be small enough that they could work on the smaller siding and switching yards, but they had to be strong enough to handle a lot of goods. This could be anything from stones to metals to ores. The company dabbled in steam cranes as well to aid the collieries and pits where the engines worked. Built in 1874 was number 305. It was given a very basic paint job and named Bauxite. It was sent to the International Aluminium Company Limited to move its namesake, bauxite ore. The ores would have been mined from all over the country and brought into the plant for processing. Bauxite would have hauled these ores into the plant where the rocks would have been unloaded and then sent to the crusher. It was then washed and dried. The crushing of the ore allowed it to move quicker for the next part of the process, dissolving. It was dissolved in a bath of sodium hydroxide and put under great heat and pressure. This allowed for the aluminium to be removed from the ore and dissolved in the solution. The rest of the particles would be filtered out, and there is no doubt that bauxite would have also helped remove this waste as well. The aluminium was separated, but it was still in a solution. To help extract the aluminium, the solution was placed in a tank called a precipitation tank. Aluminium hydroxide in the form of pellets were added to act as a starter and force the dissolved aluminium to separate from the solution in the form of crystals. It was once again washed and heated to purify it and remove any compounds from the extraction process. The aluminium was moved on to make a variety of products, and because of its difficulty in extraction, to the early Victorians it was extremely valuable to a point that they treated it like gold. It wasn't until around bauxite time that the process was developed, making aluminium available for every pocket. Number 2 would have taken the wagons from many different trains and from many different companies, but unlike many engines, its buffers were huge and unsprung. It was designed so that it could take on many variants of trucks and truck sizes. It were no frills and had a basic controls and a basic cab. They had one water gauge, a reverser, a regulator and a brake. And that were pretty much it. The only thing that set it apart from other engines was that there was a door between the back of the engine and the firebox. Because the cab is so narrow, it was difficult to rake out the firebox using the standard fireman's tools, so the door allowed for easier access. There was never any evidence that bauxite was sold or moved on from the plant, and it was evident that the plant had a try and make do policy. All around the engine are patches and dents. The chimney had been patched following an incident and the smoke box door is dented in. Repairs are dotted all over the engine with odd tubing and badly fitted weldings. Interestingly, the handles on the side of the saddle tank are aluminium and were no doubt made for her at the plant. These, other than her nameplate, are really the only thing that shines on her. There isn't much known about bauxite's history in an engineering sense either, or where or when she was overhauled. But in 1947 her working life ended. She was left in the back of a shed, and George Cohen and Sons were employed to demolish the smelting plant with her inside it and scrap the remains. But the scrapyard took pity on the hard-working little engine and was donated to the North Eastern Society of Engineering Historians. The historians wanted to preserve her, but they had other projects on the go and hadn't time to work on her yet, so to conserve her, they coated the paintwork in a layer of varnish. It were hoped that over time the varnish would be removed and they'll be able to clear the years of grime, revealing her original colours underneath. As there is no evidence bauxite was ever painted, it's one of only a few engines that can truly boast her original work's colours. Bauxite was on display at a local science museum before moving to York, where she was on display in the main museum on Queen Street. When the new museum was built, she was placed in the Great Hall. However, conservationists were ready to restore her, had an idea. Rather than preserve her back to her original unworked condition, they wanted to conserve her as she was. They wanted to leave the varnish on as it created a barrier locking in the engine's condition, and they did as much as they could to preserve her. The reason? To the team, this little engine represented the working unseen engines of the steam industrial era. These engines were a perfect example of your typical standard shunter. The engines were unseen by thousands and normally spent their lives in factories or out of sights in goods yards before going to scrap with little care. It felt fitting that she remained in her unaltered state as a testament to them. I work with industrial engines all the time. Many austerity and saddle tanks were not made for the public to see, rather be shunters for the industries many of us took for granted. The majority of the public love shiny, squeaky clean engines, and we love to take care of them. There's nothing better than shiny brass, gleaming paint and perfectly made to measure pipes and fixtures. On occasion, and on special photo charters, some heritage railways will intentionally not clean their engines for a number of weeks to try and replicate this worn out and hard worked look. It looks great on photos, but I'm in the minority. If the engine has worked hard and done its worth, it deserves to be polished to a mirror finish. However, despite this, I do like what the museum has done here. You can still see the varnish on top and it's got crazed and cracked, making the engine's condition appear brown and dirty. Its wooden buffers are flaking against the steel fronts and the dents and dirt remain. But it does show what a hard life an engine can have, and it's a representation of those that sadly didn't survive.